This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Hello, and welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Alex Masford. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode and to be continuing to listen to the show. If you are a returning listener, we really do appreciate you. Before I start talking anything sports, I want to remind you all of a couple of things. First, please subscribe to the podcast on whatever podcasting app or website you are listening to this on. To do that, you can just go to our homepage and hit the subscribe button. If you're on Apple Podcasts, it'll be in the top right-hand corner with next to that plus sign that says subscribe. You want to subscribe to the podcast for a couple of reasons, but the main one being you get those alerts and those notifications on your phone, on your laptop, on your watch, on whatever you may be listening to this episode on, and you can always know when we drop a new episode of the GSMC Sports Podcast here at the GSMC Podcast Network. Again, please subscribe to the podcast so you can get those alerts and notifications, and that way you can never miss an episode and be one of the first people to listen to a new episode when we release it. Again, please subscribe to the podcast. We'd also really appreciate it if you could leave us a 5-star review or just a positive review on that same podcasting app or website on that same device. Just to give us a boost of confidence to let us know that you guys are enjoying the content and discussion points and the structure of the show. And if you are, again, we would really appreciate it if you leave us a 5-star review or just a positive review in general on that same Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Podbean, whatever you might be listening to this on. Again, same thing. Just go to the homepage and click leave a review. That would give us a big boost of confidence. Again, it would let us know that you guys are enjoying the structure of the show and everything about it. So that would be awesome if you could. And finally, if you could follow us on all social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram is where you can primarily follow us. Over there, we can interact and pretty much talk about anything over on social media. We can talk about sports. We can talk about life. We can do some live tweeting of some big-time hockey games or baseball games when the season starts. Whatever it may be, all of those interaction needs can be found on social media. So again, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram is where you can primarily follow us, and we would love if you could do so. I hope wherever you are and however you may be listening, you and your family are happy and healthy during these extremely trying times in the world today. We have a fantastic show for you all today. Coming up later on in the episode, I do want to give you guys a new mock draft. Again, I'm going to be doing the first 16 picks this time. I think I did the first 15 last time. I want to do the first half of the first round of the mock draft. Again, I like to do these whenever we get some new information, a new trade or something like that. And obviously, with the Sam Darnold trade to the Panthers, which I will be getting to very, very soon in this episode, there's some new information. So we're going to be talking about a new mock draft coming up later on in this episode, the first 16 picks. And I do have 2 trades in the top 16, so that's going to be a lot of fun. That's coming up later on in the show. I also want to get to some other major NFL storylines going on right now. Are the Cowboys in love with Kyle Pitts? Is Mac Jones really going to go 3rd overall to the San Francisco 49ers, like everybody is saying? And also, Trey Lance, the Washington Football team, is a storyline that's also heating up. Could they be trading up to 4? We're going to get to all 3 of those things later on in the episode. At the very end of the episode, we're also going to be getting into some NBA storylines. This NBA season has been fun, but it's also been plagued by injuries. We'll break down some of the injuries coming up. When are the Lakers going to get back healthy? Where will they finish? And I want to give you sort of an updated prediction on the top 10 teams in the NBA right now. So if we have time after we talk about some of those injuries and storylines, I do want to try to give you guys a top 10 current NBA teams list right now, as this season has been crazy. But of course, we're going to start off with the biggest headline of the week in sports, and that was Sam Darnold being traded from the New York Jets to the Carolina Panthers in exchange for a 2nd and 4th round pick next year in 2022, and I believe a 6th round pick this year in 2021. And I want to break down every single angle of this, including the New York Jets side. But this was a move that a lot of people had seen coming, not necessarily to this team, but we all knew that eventually Sam Darnold was going to be moved off of by the New York Jets. They were already having the 2nd overall pick, and they want to move off of him to get a new quarterback. And it wasn't that necessarily Sam Darnold was bad, as I will explain, but again, they have to make a decision on him soon. His 5th-year option is coming up next year, so they were going to have to pay Sam to be their long-term quarterback if they wanted Darnold to be that guy, and I don't think they were just sold on him enough. However, reports are coming out that the room was pretty split on whether or not they were going to move off of Sam Darnold or not. It looks like if they had any other pick besides the 1st or 2nd overall pick, the Jets were actually going to keep Sam Darnold. So there were a lot of teams interested. Going back to the beginning of the offseason, we heard teams like Washington potentially being interested. Maybe even New England being interested. All these teams that added quarterbacks, San Francisco is another one, the Bears, were teams interested in potentially adding a quarterback like Sam Darnold. I actually pitched the idea of maybe the Broncos going after Sam Darnold. That's what I would have done if I were John Elway. But he lands with the team that a lot of people had seen making sense for Sam Darnold, and that's the Carolina Panthers. Again, Carolina has been in on the quarterback market since the beginning of this offseason. It was clear that they were not happy with the production that Teddy Bridgewater had given them last season. Not that Teddy was bad. It was more he was limited. The offense has so many capabilities with those weaponry. Again, they have Robbie Anderson, who had a breakout season last year. DJ Moore, who had a great season last year as well. Curtis Samuel steps out, but I'm blanking on his name, but his last name is Moore, coming from, I think it's David Moore, actually, from the Seattle Seahawks. He's coming in to replace that role. Christian McCaffrey's obviously there. And they wanted to have a creative, fun, sort of energetic offense, of course, with Matt Rule as the head coach, who has been a great sort of program builder overall in college, now comes to the NFL, and is part of, again, I think he has that 5 or 6 year, and maybe even 7-year contract. So again, this is a long-term thing. And he brought in Joe Brady, who was the creative offensive guru / genius that was the offensive coordinator for that LSU Tiger team that really blew up Joe Burrow, guys like Jamar Chase, and that entire LSU team into potentially becoming the greatest college football team of all time. So they wanted to have a fun offense, and while they did put up points and it was good, it wasn't great, and it was actually lower than you would have thought of. In a lot of categories, you find them in the 20s in points and things like that, in yardage as well. But they were looking for a more dynamic quarterback. And the first guy that they went after was Matthew Stafford from the Lions. Apparently that they had multiple, maybe even 2 first-round picks offered for Matthew Stafford and the Lions. But of course, the Lions wanted to do right by Stafford and move him to a team he wanted to play for. Ended up being the Los Angeles Rams. But before the Deshaun Watson sort of disaster that's going on right now, if you haven't heard, obviously he has multiple sexual abuse and sexual assault allegations going on right now, and there are many, many women coming forward. And in my opinion, I don't think Deshaun Watson should be playing football this year until that thing gets sort of taken care of. We've seen what the NFL has done in the past with Ezekiel Elliott and things like, and guys like that, and I think eventually he will get suspended or put on that commissioner's exempt list while things play out, so he's not available. So Carolina then sort of looked at what are the other options potentially at the quarterback position, and they decided to settle on New York Jets quarterback Sam Darnold, who was available at a pretty cheap price. Again, a 2nd this year, or 2nd next year in 2022, a 4th in 2022, and just a 6th round pick in this year's really, really stacked NFL draft class. Not that every NFL draft class isn't stacked. There's always going to be players on both offensive and defensive side that come out that guys are going to want. But in this particular draft class, we know that this class is deep in the offensive line position, the wide receiver position. It's only thin at some positions. I would say it's pretty thin at edge rusher, linebacker, maybe corner, but it's deep in a lot of positions. And they wanted to obviously, get those draft picks for probably this year if you were in New York, but instead they get them for next year. So I think it was a great trade for Carolina. They get a potential quarterback of the future, and the Jets, for them, this is just to get any compensation for a guy who isn't going to be used for the team in the long-term plan. Obviously for the Jets is who I want to talk about here in a little bit, but it's obviously a move that signals that they're going to be going after Zach Wilson, BYU quarterback. He's probably going to be selected number 2 overall. But again, this was sort of an expected move, so I don't want to delve deep, too much of a deep dive on the Jets side of this. Besides, I think they got enough compensation. They essentially got what the Cardinals got for Josh Rosen, for an unproven young quarterback commodity that had a chance to potentially become somebody's franchise quarterback. I think Sam Darnold is in a better spot and looked like the better player than Josh Rosen did when both of their times were done, being Sam now and Josh Rosen a couple of years ago when he was being moved off of by the Cardinals. But a second and fourth is good enough compensation. You would have probably tried to, get maybe a late first if a team like New Orleans was interested, which they were not. But for a team that had a high first-round draft pick, the only thing I would have maybe complained about if I were a New York Jets fan is I probably would have wanted the compensation in this year's draft class because of how good they are offensive weapon-wise, and I think this is a really deep offensive line draft class as well. Those are two things that you're going to want to surround a new quarterback, Zach Wilson, with, so I would have liked to see a second and a fourth this year, but beggars can't be choosers necessarily when you're trading a guy who some people would consider a bust. Now, if you want to look at the stats for Sam Darnold, you would say this guy is probably not a great quarterback. As a record, he is 13-25. He has 8,000 yards in his career, 45 touchdowns, 39 interceptions, a completion percentage under 60. You look at it and you say, this guy is an inaccurate sort of gunslinger-esque quarterback. You would see this and you would probably think along the lines of a Ryan Fitzpatrick type of guy. And Sam Darnold has a lot of Ryan Fitzpatrick in him. I think he's more mobile. He's a gunslinger sort of playmaking style of a quarterback. He's a big guy. He's 6'3", 225, played linebacker in high school. He's a physical player. He's also dealt with a lot of injuries off the field. Of course, he had, mono 2 years ago, or not 2 years ago, a year ago. So not last year, but the year before he had mono. And then last year he missed 4 games with an injury to his shoulder. This year, obviously, his stats were not great at all. In only 12 games, he went 2-10, 59% completion percentage, 2,000 yards, 9 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. And again, the biggest thing that Sam Darnold probably gets harped on 100% is the turnovers. And it's been something that's been going on since going back to college. He had 20 interceptions. I think it's 22 interceptions and 20 fumbles in college and 27 starts. Again, a ton of turnovers. But Sam Darnold has always been known as this guy that has a lot of talent, and he does. Sam Darnold has the ability to give you a wow play a game. One of those plays that Mahomes does, that Carson Wentz did his MVP season, that we see Matthew Stafford make sometimes, that we see Deshaun Watson made when he was playing for Houston, obviously. Who knows what his situation is going to be. Guys like that who was making these big-time plays that were just those wow throws that wasn't a part of a system, wasn't a part of play, sort of when things broke down, you made something happen for your team. And Sam Darnold had a lot of those plays. But he also had a lot of plays that were head scratchers, that were sort of throwing balls up for grabs, that were easy interceptions for the other team to make, and really hurting his team overall. Now, the biggest thing that everybody comes back to is the New York Jets, right? Because we know that guys have been able to revive their careers at stop 2 or 3 of their quarterback lives. We look at Ryan Tannehill, who ironically shared the same head coach as Sam Darnold did with Adam Gase. Everybody thought Ryan Tannehill was dead in the water, career over, was going to be the backup for the rest of his time in the NFL when he was in that last year in Miami when Adam Gase was the head coach. But the Dolphins moved off of Adam Gase, moved off of Ryan Tannehill. He goes to Tennessee with a really nice head coach in Mike Vrabel, a better structure, organization overall, with a lot more weapons to complement Ryan Tannehill, and all of a sudden he plays statistically like a top 10 quarterback in the NFL, and I don't think a lot of people can argue that Ryan Tannehill is as close as elite you can get to maybe not being it as an NFL quarterback. Went to the AFC Championship game 2 years ago, and we've seen guys revive their career. Carson Palmer's another guy who was not very good with Cincinnati because of the situation around him. Eventually finds his way in Arizona. Obviously goes all the way to the NFC Championship game. Tom Brady just won a Super Bowl. So we've seen that guys can do better when they go to their maybe second or third stop in their quarterback life. So Sam Darnold now going to a new system, a new team, and this is true, another true stat. The New York Jets did not have a singular offensive Pro Bowl in Sam Darnold's entire tenure as a New York Jet. That doesn't help. And what really fascinated me is that when you look at how did the Jets do without Sam Darnold, so we know how they did with Sam Darnold. When they played, obviously, in 38 games in which Sam Darnold was the starting quarterback for the New York Jets, they won 13 and lost 25. In the 10 games that Sam Darnold has not been the starting quarterback for the New York Jets since he was drafted in 2018, the New York Jets have not won a football game since 2018. Unless Sam Darnold was the starting quarterback for the New York Jets, they did not win a single football game, which is absolutely crazy to think about. Points per game when Sam Darnold wasn't playing since 2018. In those 10 games, they only averaged about 13 points per game. They only averaged about 240 yards of offense those games and only 156 passing yards. So again, while they weren't necessarily good with Sam Darnold under center, they were a lot worse without him. And again, you see the interceptions. I understand that 40 interceptions in 3 years of work is a lot of interceptions to throw. His rookie year, he threw 15. His sophomore season in 13 games, he threw 13. And again, he hasn't also played a full season in the NFL yet, so you can argue that there are some durability concerns. Only played 13 games his rookie year, 13 games his second season, and 12 games last year. And in all of those games, he threw double-digit interceptions. Again, in the first 2 seasons, he did have more touchdowns than interceptions, 15 interceptions to 17 touchdowns in 2018, 19 touchdowns to 13 interceptions in 2019, and in 2020, he had 11 interceptions to 9 touchdowns. So it's been almost a little bit of a regression from that year 2 to year 3, which is something you don't want to see out of a young quarterback. Young quarterbacks are supposed to get better each and every year. A lot of people peg that second to third year leap as the leap you're supposed to make as into a NFL caliber quarterback that can start really winning some games for your football team. You sort of get the first year at least to develop. Some teams give you that second year to develop, and then that third year you're supposed to be the player that they drafted you to be, because within 2 years of that third year that you have, that team has to make a decision on if they're going to pay you or not the money to be their franchise quarterback going forward. So again, that third year is crucial, and Sam Darnold regressed, went 2-10 again, had a 59% completion percentage, more interceptions than touchdowns. Not ideal, but again, not a single offensive Pro Bowler in any of his years in New York for Sam Darnold. We know Adam Gase is a terrible head coach, and for a lot of teams, and a lot of guys, really, again, you look at the resume of Adam Gase, you see guys that he has let go and told you're not good. He thought Jarvis Landry wasn't good enough for the Dolphins. He left. He's a stud in Cleveland. We see, obviously, what happened with Ryan Tannehill. And we've seen a lot of these guys, Kenyon Drake, move on to teams and really be real producers for other teams, despite, being told by people like Adam Gase that they weren't good enough to make those teams and things like that. The biggest factor for me is where Sam landed, and that is the Carolina Panthers. I think Matt Rule is a phenomenal coach for Sam Darnold. He understands the college scheme and college game, which I think Sam's going to thrive with a lot, which prides itself on moving the pocket, mobile quarterbacks, extending plays, things like that. Really sort of buying into Sam Darnold's playmaking style. Because again, if they weren't all in on Sam Darnold's playmaking style, they wouldn't have traded for him, because they had a guy who wasn't that playmaker at quarterback last year, Teddy Bridgewater, and they've been dragging his name through the mud pretty much since the offseason has started. They've been in on every single quarterback that could potentially be made available. They finally get Sam Darnold. They're going to want a more dynamic playmaking style offense. And here's the biggest factor for me. Joe Brady. Joe Brady turned a 24-year-old Joe Burrow, or 23 or 24-year-old Joe Burrow, as a fifth-year senior in college into arguably the best statistical season in college football history for a quarterback. Sam Darnold is younger now when he is meeting Joe Brady than Joe Burrow was when he met Joe Brady in college. So again, Joe Brady making the game easier for a young quarterback that has maybe had a rough start to his professional career, as Burrow had a rough start to his collegiate career. I'm not saying Sam Darnold's going to turn around and now light the NFL on fire, but I'm saying that don't be surprised if Sam Darnold eventually now becomes the player he was supposed to be. And we see sort of what happened to Ryan Tannehill going from the Dolphins to Tennessee. We see that happen for Sam Darnold going from the Jets to the Carolina Panthers, just at a way younger level, because again, he's only 23 years old. And that's the most enticing part about Sam Darnold, is he was the youngest player in his draft class. He came into the NFL at 20 years old. He's 23 now, super young, can still be easily developed into the player he was supposed to be. He's a confident kid still. It hasn't really sort of rattled him that he's thrown all these picks and have a tough start to his career. Going to a guy like Joe Brady and Matt Rule, who understand the college game, understand sort of new age NFL/collegiate concepts, that's going to help Sam Darnold out a lot. And I think this is going to work to an extent. I think Sam Darnold will be a lot better in Carolina than he is in New York. Will he be that franchise quarterback for Carolina? That's a question that's only Sam Darnold can really answer. I think it's going to work. I think he'll be better than Teddy Bridgewater was last year for Carolina. Will he be a franchise quarterback level talent? Will he lead them to the playoffs? Will they get a winning season? Those are the things I don't necessarily know, and we're going to have to see how it plays out through the draft. They still need a tackle. I think they also need a cornerback pretty bad. We'll get to a mock draft later, and I have them taking one of those two positions. You have to see. But for the Carolina Panthers to not give up any draft compensation this year in a really, really stacked offensive weapon and offensive line draft class, and to get a potential quarterback of the future at just 23 years old, who already has NFL experience and NFL tape and NFL issues that can be corrected, and you've seen them on tape, and you know you can correct them if you're Joe Brady. I think it's a win-win. And for the Jets, again, I do think it's a win. They were going to go after Zach Wilson all along. You had to get some compensation. You probably would have liked the first-round pick or those picks to be in this year's draft class, but at the end of the day, you do get a second and a fourth that could be used for future trades or just in the draft next year where they already are. So it's going to be an interesting situation to see now, and Carolina is now a team that I'm going to want to watch each and every Sunday when the NFL season returns, so it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. We're going to take a short break here, but on the other side of this short break, we're going to get into some of those NFL storylines surrounding the draft that I was talking about. Does it make sense for the Cowboys to trade up to 4 and get Kyle Pitts? Is Mac Jones really the guy for San Francisco, or is it all a smokescreen potentially? And what is Trey Lance going to do specifically with the Washington football team? There's a big rumor right now. Will Washington trade up to 4 and go after Trey Lance? What does it mean for Ryan Fitzpatrick? Will it actually happen? We'll get into all that great stuff right after this short break.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and we are back here at the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Again, I am your host, Alex Masferrer. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode and to be continuing to listen to the show. If you are a returning listener, I really do appreciate you. I just finished giving you my spiel on my sort of not an initial reaction, it was a couple of days ago, but the Sam Darnold to Carolina Panther trade, again, I really do believe it's going to work out for Sam Darnold, and I think he's the biggest winner in all of this for sure. And I think the opportunity to work with Joe Brady is going to be really interesting with him. Again, he is younger than when Joe Brady worked with Joe Burrow when he was about 23, 24. I think Joe Burrow was 24 his fifth year at LSU. And, of course, Sam Darnold's only 23 years old now, so he was younger than Joe Burrow was when they met Joe Brady. So I think in his addition with working with Palmer, who's Carson Palmer's brother, Jordan Palmer, who's one of the best quarterback coaches in the country, I think Sam Darnold's going to make a pretty big step up next year. I mean, is it going to lead to the Carolina Panthers maybe being a playoff team in the NFC? I'm not sure, but the Saints have definitely taken a step back. It's unsure what Atlanta's going to be next year, who their quarterback's going to be, etc. So who knows? Maybe Carolina can make a nice jump with their record, with their more dynamic quarterback potentially of the future, Sam Darnold. I want to transition now to a couple of other NFL storylines that have been sort of coming through. A lot of them are draft-related, of course. We're under 3 weeks, or a little over, I should say, 3 weeks away from the draft, or a little under. I think we're about, 19 days away, 18 days away from the draft when you're listening to this, which is absolutely awesome. I love draft season. I think the NFL has really mastered the entire draft effect. I think the NBA draft's awesome too, specifically the lottery, but I think the NFL is king when it's just all of this speculation on who people are going to draft and why. And this is just for the first round. Then we get day two and day three of an incredible draft that always has guys coming through in the fourth round, fifth round who end up being stars, guys like Aaron Jones, Dak Prescott, Tom Brady, of course. So it's just so much fun, and I think everybody and every NFL fan loves the draft because nobody ever really loses draft night, right? Everyone thinks the guy they picked is going to be the next superstar Hall of Fame, awesome guy. So it's a lot of fun. I loved draft week and everything like that, so that's coming up. But one of the storylines is Kyle Pitts, who, of course, I have talked about at length on the show. In my opinion, he's the best player in this draft class. I don't like putting a label on him. I don't think I would put WR next to him for position or TE for tight end. I think he's OW, offensive weapon. That's what he is. You can play him anywhere on the field, outside the slot, on the line as a tight end. You can even play him sort of in the backfield as sort of an H-back. in the passing game as well. He's just so freakishly athletic. He's got incredibly long arms, about LeBron James's wingspan. He's 6'5", 6'6", absolutely incredible. And really the only size comp we have to him is a guy like Mike Evans, Darren Waller, Calvin Johnson. Just complete athletic freaks, and all of those, three of those guys have really dominated the NFL. And of course, the Dallas Cowboys, according to reports, have fallen in love with Kyle Pitts. Specifically, Jerry Jones has fallen in love with the Florida tight end prospect, and they are considering trading up to the 4th overall pick, which is currently being held by Atlanta. Not to trade up for a quarterback like some of these other teams who are trying to trade up for 4 might be doing, but to take Kyle Pitts, the tight end. And it's been a really controversial topic because, again, on one hand, Kyle Pitts, in my opinion, is the best player in this draft class. There's only a few guys in this draft who I believe are cannot bust players. Guys who, in my opinion, who will not be bust. And I think there's only 2 of them. I think it's Trevor Lawrence, and I think it's him, Kyle Pitts. And again, I like guys like Jamar Chase, Penei Sewell, and I think they're going to be really, really good players, and I don't think they're going to bust by any means. But if you want somebody who, no matter who they get drafted by, is going to make an insane contribution to that team, Kyle Pitts is your dude. But the Dallas Cowboys don't need offensive help. Sure, they might have a tight end issue, but again, after taking CD Lamb last year, you get Dak Prescott back, you still have Michael Gallup on that roster, Amari Cooper's still making $100 million, and Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard are both capable offensive weapons in the backfield, especially Zeke Elliott. You need defense and maybe even some offensive line help. That offensive line is getting older. You want to keep Dak Prescott upright, help those lanes for Zeke and everything like that. And with the 10th overall pick, the Dallas Cowboys, could be in a primed position to take maybe the best defensive player in this draft, whoever you might see that being. But there's rumors that they might be trading up to 4 for a guy like Kyle Pitts. And I understand why the Cowboys want to do it. And again, this is a very Cowboy Jerry Jones move. Jerry Jones is an aggressive guy, and if there's anything he knows what to do, or how to do, I should say, it's draft offense. About like all of his draft picks, at least when they're on the offensive side, hit. All of his offensive line draft prospects have hit. All the receivers that they've drafted have obviously hit. And the one thing that Dallas has been able to consistently do through the last, 5-6 drafts is build an incredible offensive line, then got their quarterback and Ezekiel Elliott through the draft, got all the receivers except for Amari Cooper through the draft as well. So they've drafted offense well, and they know how to put points on the board. So I understand why Jerry Jones views Kyle Pitts, this can't-miss tight end prospect, as a perfect fit for the Dallas Cowboys. Yes, he would be electric in Dallas and would probably end up becoming the best offensive weapon on that team, which is obviously already fully loaded with all these offensive weapons. But this is a classic case of, do you want the Ferrari that you don't need because you already have 4 of them, or do you want to maybe get something you need more around the house or just in your life in general? And that's what Jerry Jones needs to sort of make that decision. Last year, they didn't necessarily need a wide receiver, and they still picked CeeDee Lamb because they believed he was a prospect that they couldn't miss on. They didn't have to trade up for CeeDee Lamb. This is a different story. I would understand that if Kyle Pitts fell to 10 and Dallas didn't give up any draft capital or anything, you might say that it's you just can't pass up on him because he fell so far. That's kind of what happened to CeeDee Lamb last year. Trading up for Kyle Pitts is a different story when Dallas had literally maybe the worst defense in the NFL last year, not named Jacksonville or New York. They need defensive players. Yes, they brought in Dan Quinn, who is a better defensive coach and will coach that defense up at least a little bit more than maybe the defensive coaching staff did last year. Mike McCarthy's still there, same offensive coaching staff, which I agree with because, again, they put up a ton of points, specifically when Dak Prescott's the quarterback of that team. Again, if Andy Dalton is putting up points and stuff like that, Dak Prescott will be back. He'll look good. I think Zeke is in a little bit of a prove-it year. If Ezekiel Elliott doesn't have a great year next year, it wouldn't surprise me if the Cowboys looked into moving off of him or trying to see if they can get out of that contract sooner rather than later. So it's a big year for the Dallas Cowboy players next year, and they need a defense, whether it's a pass rusher or, more importantly, in my opinion, they really need a corner. And there's a couple of really good corners in this draft, J.C. Horn, Patrick Surtain in particular, that Dallas could really, really, really use, who both should be available at pick 10, unless Denver maybe does something at the cornerback position, or if Denver traded up sort of to 4 and Atlanta dropped back to 9, I could see it. Also, wouldn't surprise me if Carolina took a corner. But again, one of those 2 corners should be there, and that's exactly what Dallas needs. They need a secondary member, and they need it bad. They were one of the worst pass defenses in the entire league last year. And sure, Dak and Dallas can put up a ton of points, and they would definitely put up more points if they got Kyle Pitts. And yes, it would be fun, and it would be the classic Jerry Jones aggressive offensive pick. And yes, Dak Prescott, it would look great, and I understand why Jerry would do it. And to be honest with you, I do kind of want to see it. Kyle Pitts in Dallas would be absolutely electric from day one. But I don't think it's going to happen. I think Jerry knows that they need defense, they need players, They already have their quarterback of the future locked up long term. They've gotten him receivers. They have an offensive line. They have a running back. Everything is set up for Dak Prescott on the Dallas Cowboy offense, which has been successful the past couple of years. It's time to start stopping some people in defensive end. They have Dan Quinn, who's going to be a good defensive coordinator, in my opinion. Wasn't a great head coach, but I think he will be a good defensive coordinator like he was in Seattle. You just got to get some players, man, and start in the secondary where Derek Quinn is probably known for, considering he came from Seattle and the Legion of Boom. I really do believe that a guy like J.C. Horn is who Dallas should be targeting, not Kyle Pitts. But again, it would be fun as hell. Again, I want to continue with this conversation about Mac Jones to the 49ers. A lot of people have been continuing to pencil in Mac Jones, and I understand that the reports are getting louder and louder, so I'm just going to assume now that maybe Mac Jones is the pick for San Francisco. I've talked about this a couple times now. He is not who I would pick if I were San Francisco. I don't know what happened to Justin Fields from when the season ended till now, but for whatever reason, he's now quarterback 5. I am very high on Trey Lance. I think he can become sort of the Josh Allen, but a little bit smaller and faster that everybody wants him to be, and I totally think that if he was drafted by San Francisco, he would develop into that player. And again, my initial reaction when that big trade went down for when San Francisco traded up from 12 to 3 was they were going after Trey Lance, a guy who was all about traits, maybe played Jimmy Garoppolo for this year, and I thought it was the perfect situation. But every reporter, Ian Rappaport, Adam Schefter, guys from NFL Network, Peter Schrager, all these guys are coming out and saying, and they're sourced, that Mac Jones, all signs are pointing towards Mac Jones being the pick for the San Francisco 49ers with the 3rd overall pick, which is, it's just crazy to me because, yes, Mac Jones had an absolutely incredible year. But again, people want to say that he's NFL ready because he's accurate and he's gotten playmakers to football. I don't think he has the greatest arm. I don't see him as a plus athlete at all. But I am to really see what Kyle Shanahan is seeing. Because again, Kyle Shanahan is known around the NFL as this incredible offensive mind. And I am not trying to bash Kyle Shanahan, but there's at a certain point now where I've seen a track record of the way that Kyle Shanahan wants things to go, and none of them end up with a Super Bowl victory like everybody says Kyle Shanahan is capable of. He has worked with quarterbacks that appear to play like Mac Jones in the past. Guys like Kirk Cousins and guys like Jimmy Garoppolo are 2 dudes that he has had success with. I think on the high end of that sort of quarterback build, you get Matt Ryan, who leads the league in passing for 4 straight years, and stuff like that. I don't know if Mac Jones will ever get to the level of Matt Ryan. I think at best he's Kirk Cousins, which is probably a step below Matt Ryan. I don't think he has as strong as an arm as Matt Ryan did, and I just don't think he can let it rip like Matt Ryan can, in my opinion. I think he's good, and I think on the best day he will look like Kirk Cousins, a really nice ball distributor, throws with nice touch, has good ball placement, can read defenses relatively well, and I will give Mac Jones credit. I think he reads defenses well and knows where to get the ball and when and where to place it as well. And if you're Kyle Shanahan, you might just think that you can call games to win them. You just need somebody to execute the system and not screw up. I can understand why Kyle Shanahan would think that if he was playing in the NFC East or if he was playing in an easier division. But again, when you're drafting Mac Jones, and let's say at best, in my opinion, Mac Jones becomes Kirk Cousins, guy who can win you a bunch of games in the regular season, maybe you win you a game or 2 in the playoffs when there's a really nice team around him and a really nice coach. San Francisco is going to have a really nice team, and I think Kyle Shanahan's a really nice coach. So let's just assume it does work out for Mac Jones, and he's Kirk Cousins. Let's just say that the division stays the same, obviously, out west, and you have Russell Wilson in that division, Kyler Murray, Matt Stafford, and let's just call him Mac Jones, a.k.a. Kirk Cousins 2.0. Kirk Cousins, even in his prime, if you put him in that division right now, would be the worst quarterback in that division, and it wouldn't really be close. Everybody would sort of be arguing who's better out of Wilson, Stafford, and Murray once Kyler Murray sort of takes that next step, and everybody would kind of be like, yeah, but we all know that Mac Jones or Kirk Cousins is 4th. In that division. And I don't think you can win a division consistently no matter how good your coach is or win Super Bowls consistently when you have the worst quarterback in your division. That's just not what happens at all. And I thought that Kyle Shanahan would understand this lesson, that the style of quarterback that he loves so much does not win Super Bowls, because he's been to 2 Super Bowls now and he has lost both. And he's lost them with the high end of that quarterback build. Matt Ryan, he lost a Super Bowl, and Jimmy Garoppolo, when he was healthy, is the high end of that quarterback build of cerebral, accurate ball placement, reads defense as well as type quarterback. That's what Jimmy Garoppolo is. That's what Kirk Cousins is. That's what Matt Ryan is, but I think Matt Ryan's sort of like the supreme talent of that. And again, he had Matt Ryan at his best at an MVP level. Will Mac Jones ever get to that level? Will Mac Jones ever win an MVP, lead the league in passing? And even when Kyle Shanahan had that, he lost in the Super Bowl. He blew a huge lead. Again, he was the offensive coordinator, not the head coach, but still, he was in charge of that offense that kind of went cold in the second half. So I don't understand why he wouldn't think that he needs to do something different at the quarterback position. There are guys who are cerebral. I think Justin Fields has a great ability to hit with some ball placement things. Again, he struggles a little bit on the sideline on those out routes, but again, it's coachable, and you don't have to throw him in the fire right away, specifically when you have a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo in your organization as well. Justin Fields would be another great pick for San Francisco. I just don't want to act like it's set in stone, though, for Mac Jones. Yes, there's a ton of reports, and yes, all signs are pointing to Mac Jones being the third overall pick, and I do have him going third overall in my mock draft, which is what we'll get to in the next segment, but I'm just not super confident that they're all the way in. They're still going to attend probably Justin Fields' second pro day that he's having in a couple of weeks. I think it's next week. And I think Trey Lance is having one 2 weeks from now. I would expect San Francisco to go to both of those. And if they go to both of those, that means that they haven't completely bought in all the way on Mac Jones, but all reports are signaling that. So it's going to be really interesting to play out. The final thing I want to talk about in this segment quickly before I do get to that mock draft is a report coming out that Washington might go all the way up to 4 and trade for and land Trey Lance. And I understand why Washington wants to do it. They have Ryan Fitzpatrick, who they clearly are committed to this year, as they should be. I think it'll be a fun year in Washington with all those offensive weapons. Trey Lance would be the perfect successor to Ryan Fitzpatrick, a guy who can help sort of teach him the mental side of the game, reading defenses, things like that, while they coach up his traits and accuracy and sort of refine his mechanics in the throwing motion. I just don't see Atlanta going all the way down to 20 from the 4th overall pick when they want to win probably sooner rather than later. They probably want to stay in the top 15-ish, hopefully maybe in the top 10 would be their ultimate goal in order to still land one of them, maybe the top offensive lineman of the class or one of the top defenders in this class, cornerback, linebackers, whatever it may be. That's probably what Atlanta wants to do, and I think this is most likely a smokescreen to get teams like the Patriots and teams, whoever wants to trade up to the 4th overall pick, again, the Dallas Cowboys, who are interested apparently as well, to try to get them to expand their offers and maybe throw in some more picks or even players to get all the way up to that 4th overall pick. But again, if Atlanta was willing to trade down all the way down to the 20s and give Washington that pick, it would cost at least 3 first-round picks, in my opinion, for them to move all the way down there. I think Trey Lance would be an awesome quarterback of the future in Washington, who's got a Cam Newton sort of like build, and of course Ron Rivera went to a Super Bowl with Cam Newton, so I think it would be a lot of fun, but I just don't think it's going to happen. All right, that's going to do it for this segment. On the other side of this short break, we're going to get into my second real mock draft. I've done a bunch of these really throughout the last couple of weeks, but this is my second one where I'm doing the top 16 picks this time. The last one was my first one where I really did a deep dive on the first 15 picks. I'm going to do 16 picks this time. I want to give you the first half of the first round. We have a couple of trades. It's going to be a lot of fun, so we're going to get into that second mock draft right after this short break.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and we are back here at the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Again, I am your host, Alex Masfer. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode and to be continuing to listen to the show. If you are a returning listener, we really do appreciate you. I just finished giving you my spiel on maybe potentially Kyle Pitts to the Cowboys, Mac Jones to the 49ers, and Trey Lance to Washington, all big-time NFL rumors that have been going on the last week or so. For this segment, I want to give you my second big-time mock draft. Again, I did a lot of top 10 mock drafts throughout the offseason, but I've really had one big mock draft, which was my first 15 picks. I want to expand them to 16 picks just to make it the first half of the draft. I'll be trying to do these at least every other episode because, again, we're getting new information about the draft each and every week, and we're a little under 3 weeks away. We're about 18 days away from the NFL draft, and the episode before the draft that I do, I will make sure to do a full first-round draft for all 32 teams and all 32 picks. I don't want to just leave it off at 16 specifically for that week. But for this segment, I will be giving you my first 16 picks. Again, this is a reminder, this is not necessarily what I would do if I was the GM of each of these teams, but based off reports, based off things that I'm reading, and also a little bit of my own personal analysis, this is how I believe I am predicting the first 16 picks to go. So I think this is where each team is going to go. I'll tell you why. We have some trades in here as well, because again, no mock draft is complete without trades. There's definitely going to be some trades on draft night, depending on where some guys fall and things like that. So let's get right into this. We're going to sort of fly through the first 3 picks here. I think we know what the order is going to go, but I'll go through them quickly. Of course, the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to be taking Trevor Lawrence first overall. Urban Meyer doesn't come out of retirement unless it's for a reason. It's for this special quarterback prospect, Trevor Lawrence. He'll start right away. No quarterback competition. I think he'll get that Kyler Murray treatment, Andrew Luck treatment. Walk in, day one, expect to perform. I think it's going to work out for all parties involved. And I think Trevor Lawrence to the Jags is going to be a lot of fun for years and years to watch in that division that isn't the greatest division in the world. So I don't think Jacksonville is going to be good next year. But I think Trevor Lawrence is definitely going to make them a must-watch team each and every Sunday. So for the first overall pick, of course, the Jaguars are going to take Trevor Lawrence. With the second pick, of course, the Jets, after moving off of Sam Darnold, want to sort of reset their rebuild, reset their quarterback price. Don't have to pay their quarterback now instead of next year where they would have had to pay Sam Darnold in the next 2 years. They don't have to pay Zach Wilson now for, 5 years at least. So Zach Wilson's going to be that second overall pick for the New York Jets. Again, people have been comparing him to Mahomes, Rodgers, Kyler Murray. I don't like comparing guys to that high level, but again, he does play like those guys. He has a little bit of an issue with pressure in his face, but other than that, he's got a lively electric arm. He makes a lot of those wow throws that you see guys like Mahomes make, and you see some other really talented quarterbacks like Aaron Rodgers make in this league, and Kyler Murray and Russell Wilson. And he's the future of the quarterback position, that mobile two-way sort of playmaker, elastic arm, off-platform guru. And there's one thing Zach Wilson is really good at. It's off-platform throws. And if you're the New York Jets quarterback, you've been making a lot of those recently because of the offensive line and how unfortunate it is, to say the least. But at the end of the day, they moved off of Sam Darnold for a reason. They're obviously looking for a new quarterback. And in my opinion, that guy is going to be Zach Wilson of BYU. So again, with the second pick, I have the Jets taking Zach Wilson. With the third overall pick, I just can't ignore the noise at this point. I'm going to have to say Mac Jones is going to be the pick for the 49ers. And again, I've bashed on Mac Jones enough, but let me try and focus on the positive. Mac Jones is a great ball distributor. He is accurate, and I think he reads defense as well. He is already used to playing in a complex offensive style, obviously, which is what Alabama was with Steve Sarkisian, with a lot of movement in the backfield from the running backs, from the receivers, a lot of motion plays, complex of designs on offense. Kyle Shanahan's going to have a lot of those as well, so it would sort of be a seamless transition from the Alabama offense to San Francisco. And again, if you're Kyle Shanahan, maybe you're viewing this sort of from a financial thing as well. We get to spend more money on other positions because Mac Jones, at worst, is Jimmy Garoppolo. At best, in my opinion, is going to become Kirk Cousins, and I honestly do believe that San Francisco is a well-run organization and Kyle Shanahan is a really good coach. And again, whoever San Francisco picks, even if it's not Mac Jones, I think they will be successful because of how good they are as an organization. And we know for rookie quarterbacks, where you land matters for a projection of your career and how you do, really. So I think San Francisco is the ideal landing spot for any of these quarterbacks. I think they're going to take Mac Jones. I think he'll end up being Kirk Cousins, which I don't know how many divisions that wins you in the NFC West, unless all of a sudden Russell Wilson's getting traded anytime soon. But I understand where they're coming from a scheme and play style standpoint. I just don't necessarily agree with the pick if you're trading all the way up. It's number 3. But with the third overall pick, it's looking like Mac Jones will be selected by the San Francisco 49ers. All right, now we're at the 4th overall pick, and this is where I have my first trade. I do not believe Atlanta's going to be taking anybody with the 4th pick. I think they're going to trade down. It's really tough to call who they're going to trade down. I think it's going to be one of these three teams. I think it's either going to be the Patriots, the Washington football team, or the Denver Broncos. I'm going to go with the Denver Broncos in this mock draft because they have the highest pick out of all those teams. I could also see Chicago being interested, but they also pick in the 20s. So I don't know if Atlanta will go all the way down there. So I have the Broncos going up from 9 to 4 to select Trey Lance. John Elway has to remember himself in college as these two-way playmaking quarterback with a little bit of an awkward throwing motion. I'm not saying that Trey Lance is going to become John Elway, not at all. But John Elway knows what he likes in quarterbacks, and he really likes Paxton Lynch, who is sort of a trait guy like Trey Lance is. And I think he might fall in love again with Trey Lance. And again, he might have the easiest pathway to trading up to number 4 because they do hold the 9th overall pick. I think Trey Lance versus Drew Lock in camp would be a lot of fun as well. You don't necessarily have to start Trey Lance right away. I've also heard that they're interested in trading for Teddy Bridgewater. Maybe you bring in 3 quarterbacks, Bridgewater and Lance, and you have Drew Lock as well there, all competing for the starting spot. Wouldn't surprise me at all. So for the Broncos, I think they understand that Drew Lock probably isn't their guy moving forward. He's a little bit too inconsistent, and I think they trade up and get their guy in Trey Lance. And again, that's one of those rumors that has not really been talked about a whole lot. And usually when it's not talked about a whole lot, things like that happen. Nobody expected San Francisco to go up to 3. That wasn't really talked about. And I think something similar happened with the 4th overall pick, and I think Atlanta will drop to 9. So again, with the 4th overall pick, I have the Broncos trading up and selecting Trey Lance. With the 5th overall pick, that's the Cincinnati Bengals. I think they're going to listen to their quarterback, and a new report coming out of the Athletic saying that the Bengals coaches are absolutely in love with Jamar Chase, and they want to potentially reunite Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase together in Cincinnati, and I think they're going to do it. So with the 5th pick, I have the Bengals selecting Jamar Chase, who is the best wide receiver, pure wide receiver prospect in this draft class. A lot of people are saying that he, including Ian Rappaport, had a little nice quote from an anonymous scout there saying he's the best wide receiver prospect since Julio Jones. And if you're Cincinnati, you want to put some butts in the seats and you want to make Joe Burrow happy as much as possible. And if he is signing off on not drafting an offensive lineman like Penei Sewell to take Jamar Chase, even though he's the one who got hurt, then that's, in a way, Joe Burrow's call. And if you want to respect your franchise quarterback, you do it, and you reunite him with his superstar teammate, Jamar Chase. And boy, would this be fun to watch in the AFC North. So with the 5th overall pick, I have the Cincinnati Bengals taking Jamar Chase, which means with the 6th overall pick, this is as far as Kyle Pitts will drop, in my opinion, and I think the Miami Dolphins will select him. I've had him going there in the last couple of mock drafts that I've done, and again, he's the best overall offensive weapon in this class. The Miami Dolphins just need a dynamic weapon on offense. Him and Mike Gesicki would arguably be a top 3 tight end room in the NFL already. Mike Gesicki is right on that cusp of Pro Bowl elite level. If he can just do what he does about 4 or 5 games a year, Mike Gesicki gets like 2 touchdowns and over 100 yards. He just need that almost more consistently each and every week. And again, he's still on a rookie contract. He's only about 24, 25 years old. So I think he's 24. So he's got plenty of time to grow and develop into that player maybe as soon as next year. Pair him with Kyle Pitts, you can put everywhere. Slot, outside, on the line as a tight end. Hell, even in the backfield as sort of an H-wing back. He's just an offensive weapon, man. He's absolutely electric and so much fun to watch. And I think the farthest he slides is to 6 to the Miami Dolphins. I think if he is there, the Dolphins will take them. So again, for the 6th overall pick, I have the Dolphins taking offensive weapon Kyle Pitts. And with the 7th overall pick, I have a surprise trade here. I think that the Chargers are going to trade up potentially from the 13th overall pick to the 7th overall pick with the Detroit Lions. I think the Lions have a lot of needs, and I think Brad Mahomes, new general manager, is trying to really do this rebuild properly by getting as much draft picks as possible. They do not need a quarterback. You could argue they could take receiver here, Devonta Smith, than they have. I think they have just more needs overall and want to get more draft capital. I think they're going to slide down here to the 13th overall pick, and I think the Chargers go all in on Justin Herbert early because they know when you have a young quarterback on a rookie deal, you have to go all in. Staley, the coach, comes from the Los Angeles Rams, which is an aggressive organization, coaching staff, just in general. Coming from the Rams, you're usually an aggressive type of coach or aggressive front office member, and I think those two who have a connection, Brad Holmes, the GM of the Lions, has a connection to Staley, the head coach of the Chargers now. I think they make something work, and I think the Chargers, similar to the Bengals, reunite their quarterback with maybe their favorite teammate who was helping them out the most in college, and I think Penei Sewell to the Chargers makes a lot of sense. They recently signed Corey Lindsey, the top center, maybe in the entire league from the Green Bay Packers. They want to double down on that offensive line. Justin Herbert was already so good last year when he was under duress and under the blitz. Imagine if he had a clean pocket. They already have the offensive weapons to make a ton of noise offensively, and they already have a stacked defense with now a defensive-minded head coach. Let's protect Justin Herbert. After signing Corey Lindsey, why don't they trade up the 7th overall pick and reunite him with his former blindside tackle, Penei Sewell? I don't think anybody can attest to Penei Sewell's ability more than maybe Justin Herbert, as he was his left tackle all throughout their Oregon college days, and I think it's going to be a seamless fit there. So I have the Chargers with a surprise trade-up going after Penei Sewell. And then with the next pick, I have the New England Patriots also trading up with the 8th overall pick. So this is for a couple of reasons. One of them being, I believe that the number one guy probably on the Carolina Panthers draft board right now is Penei Sewell to protect Sam Darnold, their new franchise quarterback potentially, which is why I have the Chargers, who desperately want to protect Justin Herbert, trading above them. So since Penei Sewell is off the board, I think that the Panthers decide to trade down, and this is the perfect opportunity for the New England Patriots to trade up from 15 to 8 and select Justin Fields, quarterback, Ohio State, who in my opinion would pretty much become Dak Prescott 2.0 for the New England Patriots and win a ton of games his rookie year. In my opinion, this is the underrated draft move of the year to watch. If the New England Patriots get Justin Fields, that could be the league's worst nightmare. I think Justin Fields is an incredibly talented quarterback. He's 6'3", 6'4", can run, supreme athlete, dual threat guy who has a cannon of an arm. Yes, he's got to work on some mechanical things and some short-term and intermediate accuracy. Belichick and McDaniels can coach him up into that, and Cam Newton would be a great veteran from him to learn from as well. So I think after Penei Sewell gets taken by the Chargers at 7, after they trade up, I think the Panthers want to trade down and get some more draft capital to help build that secondary and defense potentially, or maybe even get some more help for Sam Darnold, and they let the Patriots trade all the way up and select Justin Fields with the 8th overall pick. And then we're at the 9th overall pick, which again is the Atlanta Falcons, who traded down in my version of this mock draft with the Broncos. And with the 9th overall pick, we finally get a defensive player taken off the board, and I think the Falcons take Patrick Surtain, the cornerback out of Alabama. He is not my personal favorite corner in this draft class. He's 2 for me. However, he is a really, really good cornerback, and I think he could be a potential superstar for that Atlanta Falcons defense, and they desperately need defensive help in every way they can. So after trading down with the Broncos and maybe picking up a pick or two, they still get the top corner probably in this draft class for them, or just as the consensus. Not for me personally, but around the NFL, a lot of people have Patrick Surtain as that number 1 corner, and I have him going 9th overall to the Falcons after they trade down with Denver. 10 is the Dallas Cowboys. You heard me mention this name before in last segment, and I think J.C. Horn is the pick for them. He reminds me of a longer, more physical Richard Sherman. He's out of, obviously, the University of South Carolina. Big, physical corner who's got great hands, incredible instincts, and really, really good and really, really physical as well. High IQ football player. Perfect pick for Dallas. I think Jerry Jones is tempted to move all the way up to 4 to get a guy like Kyle Pitts, but I just simply think the Broncos, who are going for a quarterback, potentially outbid them. They settle for J.C. Horn, who is my personal favorite cornerback in this draft class. I think the kid's going to be an absolute stud, and wouldn't surprise me if he's the Richard Sherman of that Dallas Cowboy defense and really anchoring them down in the secondary for years and years to come. I think it would be an absolutely huge addition for them. With the 11th overall pick, I think the New York Giants take Devonta Smith. They've been adding Daniel Jones weapons all throughout this offseason. You give him Devonta Smith, you add Kenny Golladay, and you sort of have this thunder and lightning combination of a jump ball guy and a speed guy. Then there would be no more excuses for Daniel Jones. Saquon Barkley, Kenny Golladay, Devonta Smith, the Heisman winner. It would be absolutely electric for the city of New York and the Giants organization. I think it'd be absolutely perfect. And I think Devonta Smith to the Giants would be his floor. This is probably the latest, I should say. This is the latest he would fall. I think his ceiling is 6. I think the highest he will go is there, but his floor is definitely 11. I don't think he falls past the New York Giants, who apparently, according to reports, really, really like him as a prospect. So with the 11th overall pick, I have the Giants taking Devonta Smith. With the 12th overall pick, this pick is the same as my last mock draft. I think the Eagles are rewarded from trading down from 6 to 12, and they get the super speeder Jalen Waddle, who reminds them of Deshaun Jackson and sort of gives them a Tyreek Hill, Deshaun Jackson option going forward and helps Jalen Hurts out a lot. They were teammates a little bit, I think, maybe for 1 year at Alabama. Actually, I'm not sure. Jalen Waddle isn't a part of that draft class now that I think about it. So I don't know if they were ever teammates at Alabama, but nonetheless, a huge, big-time speed demon weapon for Jalen Hurts to work with this year, and maybe a different quarterback to work with in the future, depending on how he does this year. With the 12th pick, I have the Eagles taking Jalen Waddle. Now we're back to the Lions, who, of course, were supposed to pick 7, but for me, are trading down with the Chargers to 13. I think they take Rashawn Slater, the Midwest Northwestern guard/tackle, bolster that offensive line for Jared Goff, and I think this is the farthest that he falls as well. And I think he gets caught up in the Penei Sewell offensive weapon and quarterback sort of run hype, and he falls a little bit probably longer than he expected to. But I think the Lions at 13 after trading down with the Chargers would be ecstatic to land him. 14, I had the Vikings selecting Kwity Paye like I did in my last mock draft. They need a pass rusher, and they need one badly, but they've been trying to get guys like Yannick Ngakoue, different guys to come in and be that stud pass rusher. Haven't really been able to find it at a consistent level. I think Kwity Paye out of Michigan would be absolutely electric in that team's defense, and I think they go in the pass rusher direction. With the 15th overall pick, this is usually what the Patriots are picking, but again, I had them trading up to 8, so this is now the Panthers pick. I think they get their offensive lineman that they were looking for, obviously, to protect Sam Darnold, while also picking up a couple extra picks. Elijah Vera-Tucker out of USC can be sort of an inside-outside guard. Can play interior. I think he can play a little bit of tackle at USC too. Really, really good, versatile offensive lineman that Matt Rule and Joe Brady are absolutely going to love. Reminds them sort of a college versatility level on the offensive line. And he would be a big, big-time guy to protect Sam Darnold with both USC guys as well. So that can't hurt. And that's who I have them taking with the 15th pick. And then finally, to wrap up this mock draft, what the Cardinals have with the 16th pick, I think we finally see a running back off the board. I think Najee Harris could potentially go as high as 16 here. This is the highest I see him being picked, but nonetheless, I do have him being picked here by the Cardinals. Their defense isn't great. Their offensive line isn't great. If Slater or Vera-Tucker were there, I would say that they would take them. But since in this mock draft, I have both of them gone by then, I think Najee Harris makes a lot of sense as a 6'3", pass-catching, dynamic, speed, good mix of speed and power running back for a team that's been really, really missing a go-to cowbell back that they can be using week in, week out against a really, really good defensive division that has San Francisco, Seattle, and the Rams. So with the 16th pick and the final pick of this mock draft, I have the Cardinals selecting Najee Harris. I had a lot of fun doing this mock draft, a lot of trades. I'll probably do another one, maybe not next episode, but the episode after I'm sure we get some more information about who teams like and why, where some guys may go, and who knows, maybe we'll have a new report on who San Francisco is taking, and who the hell knows, maybe a surprise team trades up to 4 by then. All right, that's going to do it for this segment. On the other side of this short break, I want to recap some NBA storylines, and if we have time, give you my top 10 NBA teams. We'll get into all that great stuff right after this final short break.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
And we are back here at the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Podcast Network for the final segment of today's absolutely packed show. And for the final segment, I do actually want to give you guys my top 10 NBA teams right now. I haven't done it in a while, actually. Again, this NBA season has been fun, but it's also been plagued by injuries. We, of course, the Lakers, the Nets, teams like the Celtics, teams like the Heat have all been dealing with injuries really throughout the entire season. Of course, a team like the Charlotte Hornets has lost LaMelo Ball. And they also lost Gordon Hayward. The Warriors just lost James Wiseman for the year. So again, this season has been plagued by injuries. I think the short off season for some of the teams in the bubble didn't necessarily help with that. But this is when healthy, my top 10 teams in the NBA. So this is sort of, if the playoffs started tomorrow and everybody came back and was healthy, this is the top 10 teams that I have right now. So let's get right into it. Number 1, I'm going to go from 1 to 10. Actually, I'll go from 10 to 1. So starting off with number 10, I have the Portland Trailblazers. Having a big bounce back year after struggling at the end of last year and barely getting into that playoff sort of play-in round and things like that. and they obviously ended up making it into the playoffs, but they also had a sort of a tough end to last season. This year, they're 31-21 so far. They're 6th in the Western Conference, 8.5 games back from the number 1 seeded Jazz. They're my 10th team. Again, Dame is having another absolutely incredible year, and Enes Kanter, who they got back, has actually been a really nice contributor for them as well. Moved off of Gary Trent. Moved into Toronto to get some extra pieces as well. So I really do believe that Portland is a good team this year. Again, I just don't know if they're better than they are the past couple of seasons, but 6th in the West, 31-21 for them this year, and they are my 10th best team in the NBA. Number 9 is the Milwaukee Bucks this year. I like what the Bucks are doing in the regular season. Every single year, of course, they have another incredible regular season record. They're 32-20 this year, but I just don't see how they upgraded hugely compared to last season. They have no bench. Yes, I love Drew Holiday and have been a fan of his game for years, but they don't necessarily, how should I say, He's not a series winner, in my opinion. I don't know if he makes a second-round team, a third-round team. I don't know if Drew Holiday does that. So for that reason, I have the Bucks staying at 9, and they have a terrible, terrible bench as well. Not a lot of guys that can contribute beyond the 5 starters. Now, it is an upgrade that they have Drew Holiday, and again, I like Mike Budenholzer as a head coach, but in the playoffs, he tends to choke, and I don't know if Drew Holiday is an envelope pusher when it comes from your team making it to another round because of him or something like that. So for that reason, I have the Bucks at number 9. At number 8, I have the Miami Heat, and I would have them a lot higher, except they're one of the most inconsistent teams in the NBA. They go on 7-game win streaks, then they go on 5-game losing streaks like it's their job. Again, they're 5-5 in their last 10. They're only 27-25 this year. I think they're getting it right. They had a really, really rough start to the season, so since the All-Star break, they have one more than they have lost, and they are on the team trending up. They just added Victor Oladipo, who unfortunately suffered a leg injury in his 3rd game, which was his best game against the Lakers. If you remember, he was doing really well for the Heat. If Oladipo is not done for the season, and it's looking like he should be okay eventually, he's seeing a specialist soon, according to reports. I think the Heat are a top 10 team, and I think they're 8, and I do think they have a chance to get back to the Eastern Conference Finals, assuming their shooting stays up the way that it was last year and is trending now. They had a tough shooting start to the year, but they're sort of finding their groove. Duncan Robinson and Tyler Hero both shooting above 40, I think 5%-ish in that range since the All-Star break. So maybe those young guys with their lack of trade rumors now could play a lot better. So that I have the Heat at number 8. At number 7, I have the Philadelphia 76ers, who are number 1 in the Eastern Conference right now. And yeah, I understand that you might think that's too low for them, but again, this is just the same thing of I don't know how they're going to perform in the playoffs, and I'm still not fully bought into Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons. Now, Doc Rivers has changed this program, obviously, from night and day. They are winning a hell of a lot more games. They're definitely better. The additions of Seth Curry and everything's going to help as well. Right now, I obviously believe it's going to be Nets-them in the Eastern Conference Finals, so that just shows you how high I am on these teams in the Western Conference. I do think Philadelphia is the second best team in the Eastern Conference right now, and I think Doc Rivers deserves a lot of credit for that. And Joel Embiid is really having an MVP type season when he's healthy and he's playing out there. But for the 7th best team, I believe it is the Philadelphia 76ers, but I do believe they're the second best team in the Eastern Conference. Coming in at number 6, I have the Denver Nuggets. Nikola Jokic has led them to the 4th spot in the Western Conference. He is arguably the MVP favorite right now as well. They're 34-19 right now, 8-2 in their last 10. They're absolutely on fire. They could, in my opinion, jump all the way up to 3rd in the Western Conference. I think that's probably their ceiling, but I think 4th sounds about right for them, assuming that the Lakers get healthy and sort of move their way back up eventually. Again, Nikola Jokic is absolutely electric. They've added some guys as well. I think Nikola Jokic should carry them pretty far into the playoffs. Will they make it back to the Western Conference Finals, though, this year? I don't think so. I think they've taken a small step back than last year, but I still think they're a really, really good team, and I think they're the 6th best team in the NBA. I think number 5 would probably go to the LA Clippers. Again, similar reasoning. I don't love what they have for a bench. They got rid of Lou Williams, replaced him with Rajon Rondo, who's a better point guard than maybe Patrick Beverley or Reggie Jackson are. Again, not sure if he's an envelope pusher, not sure if he's the difference between the Clippers making or missing the Western Conference Finals, but nonetheless, the Clippers are still a really, really good team. Also, 8-2 in their last 10. They're 36-18 on the year, 4.5 games out of first place in the Western Conference, and I believe they are the 5th best team in the NBA. Right now, 4, I have the Phoenix Suns, and I think Devin Booker should really be getting more MVP consideration. He is the best player on that team, but I think the real spark was when they traded for Chris Paul. He's absolutely changed that culture, that organization, really. 37-15 this year is Phoenix, 2.5 games out of first place from the Jazz, and I don't think anybody expected them to be this good. I told you that they would be finishing top 4 in the Western Conference when they traded for Chris Paul. Wherever Chris Paul goes, they usually seem to become a winning team and winning organization. That's no different different from when Chris Paul went to the Suns. And I think Monty Williams is one of the more underrated head coaches in the league as well. And DeAndre Ayton's really starting to come into his own, which is really nice to see from that number 1 overall pick that Phoenix had a couple years ago when they passed on a guy in Luka Doncic, who could have been a really, really nice partnership, obviously, with Devin Booker. But I think the Suns are the 4th best team in the NBA. I think the 3rd best team is the Utah Jazz. I am all in on the Jazz. I think they have that chance to make the Western Conference Finals, and I think they will be the team that meets the Lakers there eventually once LeBron and AD get healthy, assuming they do. I think the Jazz play like that Heat team did last year, a complete collective unit that can beat you on any given night because of their shooting and their defense. Rudy Gobert anchoring the paint, but of course Donovan Mitchell, in my opinion, is that superstar on that team, and he deserves more MVP votes and MVP credit than anybody else who isn't getting it right now. 40-30, they're already a 40-win team, 8-2 in their last 10, 24-2 home record. It's going to be tough to go to Phoenix if they have home court advantage throughout the entire playoffs and beat them 4 out of 7 times. They don't even have 4 losses right now. They're the only team, actually, that doesn't even have 4 losses at home this year. Best home record in the NBA, and it's not even close. They're absolutely electric, incredible shooting, incredible defense, and I believe they are the 3rd best team in the NBA when everybody is healthy. But right now, they're just the best team in the NBA, period. Number 2, I have the Brooklyn Nets. I understand that Harden and KD and Kyrie can't seem to find a way to be on the court at the same time. They will be for the playoffs, and they're going to be incredible. Yes, their defense stinks. They're going to outscore everybody. It's just that simple. They're the 2nd best team in the NBA. Don't kid yourself. And also don't kid yourself if you think the Lakers are not the best team when fully healthy. Their bench, Dennis Schroeder, Montrezl Harrell, guys like that are starting to finally come into fold and play up to their level. They're also battling with a lot of injuries right now. 5-5 in their last 10, but again, they're just trying to survive this time period without LeBron and AD. When they're both playing, they won a championship last year for a reason. While they are hurt, they should be coming back a little bit, at least well rested. At least AD should be. He hasn't played in a long time. Once they're both back and healthy, they're the best duo in the NBA, and that makes them the best team in the NBA, in my opinion. However, don't be surprised if Utah makes it a lot tougher series in the West than people give it credit for. I am all in on the Jazz, and I think they will be giving the Lakers a run for their money. And if it goes to 7 games, Utah is a tough place to play in, and the Jazz have so many guys that can handle the ball, that can shoot. Joe Harris, Bogdanovich, Donovan Mitchell, Mike Conley. Jordan Clarkson's going to win 6th man of the year this year. He's coming off the bench, and he's dropping about 20 a night. Absolutely electric stuff out of Utah. And again, I put them at 3rd, but I think right now they're probably, just from a record standpoint, they're obviously the best team in the NBA, and I think they'll give the Lakers a run for their money. But I think eventually we will be getting Nets-Lakers, and that'll be one for the ages. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode of the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Before I let you go, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, follow us on all social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and leave us a 5-star review or just a positive review in general. Again, I have been your host, Alex Mashford. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode, and I will see you all in the next one.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.